Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, I need you to do something for me. I need you to take everything you think you know about how the world works, how your car engine runs, how electricity is generated, even how water flows down a river, and I need you to just set it aside for the next hour.
Just for a bit. Put it in a box.
Exactly. Tape it shut. Because we're going to break your brain a little bit today.
Oh.
And I don't say that lightly.
Yeah.
We usually talk about technology or history or science as these separate, neat little buckets. But today we're looking at a stack of research that suggests we have been fundamentally, and I mean physics level, fundamentally doing everything wrong for about 200 years.
It is a bold claim, I know. It sounds like hyperbole when you first hear it.
It does.
But when you actually look at the source material we have today, and it ranges from cutting-edge plasma physics experiments in the 21st century all the way back to the, esoteric philosophy of Rudolf Steiner in the early 1900s, a very disturbing pattern starts to emerge.
Disturbing is exactly the right word, because the premise here isn't that we just need better batteries or more solar panels. The premise is that we don't actually have an energy crisis. We have a motion crisis.
Well, that is the crux of it. We're moving things the wrong way, the wrong geometry.
And the headline, if I had to write one for this deep dive, is this: our entire civilization is built on the death force.
It sounds so dramatic, doesn't it? Like something from a heavy metal album cover.
It really does. But we aren't talking about magic or, some kind of doom-mongering here. We're talking about combustion, explosion, pressure.
The very things that make our world go round.
Right. The things that make our cars go, our rockets fly, our lights turn on. The sources we're looking at are arguing that this specific type of motion explosion is killing the planet. And not just because of CO2 or particulates, but because the motion itself is, well, it's anti-life.
It's the wrong polarity. It's about the geometry of the movement itself. And the alternative they propose, what they call the life force, is the complete opposite.
Implosion, suction, cooling.
Yes. It's the physics of a tornado versus the physics of a bomb. One organizes, the other destroys.
So we have a massive amount to unpack today. We're going to talk about a lab experiment where a star literally ate its containment grid.
An incredible story.
We're going to talk about water that acts like it's conscious, and we're going to talk about a device called the Thunderstorm Generator. But I want to start with the anomaly, because that's usually where the cracks in the standard model start to show.
That's where you find the loose thread, the Sapphire Project.
Yes, the Sapphire Project. For anyone listening who hasn't spent their weekend reading dense plasma physics journals, maybe set the scene for us. What was this project even trying to do?
Okay, so the Sapphire Project was, in essence, an attempt to create a star in a jar.
A star in a jar. I like it.
They were using an electric discharge in a special chamber to create this high-energy plasma. The goal was to study how stars function, how plasma behaves in these incredibly high-energy states. They weren't trying to break physics. They were trying to model our own sun.
Okay, so we've got a chamber, we've got a ton of electricity, and we have plasma. Now, to understand why what happened next is so significant, you have to really get into the materialist mindset.
Right.
The standard model of physics treats matter as dead, solid stuff. If you want to contain something super hot, you build a box made of something with a really, really high melting point. Simple as that.
You build a cage. And in this case, the cage was made of tungsten.
Why tungsten specifically?
Tungsten is the heavyweight champion of metals. I mean, it has the highest melting point of any element we've ever discovered. It's the gold standard for tough material. If you're building a containment grid for something incredibly hot, you use tungsten. It withstands temperatures that would vaporize steel in a microsecond.
So the logic is, if the plasma gets too hot for the cage, the tungsten should melt. Like an ice cube in an oven, it melts, turns into a liquid. Maybe it evaporates. You'd see it fail in a predictable way.
That is what thermodynamics says should happen. That is what all the textbooks would predict. But that is absolutely not what happened in the Sapphire chamber.
What happened?
The plasma didn't just melt the tungsten. It ate it.
Ate it? What do you mean, ate it?
That's the only way they could describe it.
Yeah.
The tungsten didn't turn into a puddle on the floor of the chamber. It disintegrated. It vanished from the grid structure. And even stranger, it seemed to reform into something else entirely, which is a whole other rabbit hole we'll get to.
Yeah.
But the immediate shock was just the disappearance.
And there's that specific detail in the notes about the Langmuir probe. This part is just mind-bending.
Oh, the probe. This is the smoking gun for the whole anomaly.
This is an $11,000 piece of equipment we're talking about, right?
It is a highly sophisticated sensor. It's designed to measure temperature and electron density. They stick this probe into the plasma field to get a reading. Now, usually if a probe fails because it's too hot, it melts. You pull out a slag, deformed lump of metal, you look at it and you say, oops, well, we cooked it.
Right.
Makes sense. In this case, they were reviewing the high-speed video footage. In one frame of the video, the probe is there. It's solid. It's functioning. In the very next frame, we're talking milliseconds later, it is gone.
Gone. Not melting, not breaking apart.
Vanished. No dripping, no slag. Just dematerialized. It was as if the plasma environment just decided that the probe shouldn't exist anymore, and it was gone.
And this is where we really hit the wall of materialism, isn't it? Standard physics looks at that and has to say, error, equipment failure, or, we must have missed the melting.
Exactly.
But what the sources we're looking at today suggest is that when you create these high-energy plasma environments, these plasmoids, you are entering a state of physics where matter isn't solid anymore. It becomes plastic. It becomes malleable.
It implies a biological function, almost. Like the plasma is behaving like a living entity that metabolizes its container.
And this brings us right to the core thesis of this whole deep dive. Why did the containment fail? It failed because we tried to contain a living high-energy force with dead matter. We tried to use pressure and resistance, the death force, to hold back something that operates on a totally different principle.
Exactly. We tried to box it in. And you can't put star in a box.
We need to define this death force more clearly before we go any further. Yeah. Because this isn't just some poetic term they're throwing around. It's a very specific mechanical description.
Right. This comes largely from the work of Viktor Schauberger, the Austrian water wizard, as they called him.
A great nickname.
It is. He was talking about all of this way back in the 1930s. He looked at our engines, our propellers, our dams, and he basically said, you people are insane.
You move incorrectly.
You move everything the wrong way. And Schauberger was a fascinating figure. He wasn't a university academic. He was a forester. He learned from nature. He spent his life watching water, watching how trees grew. And his central critique was that all modern technology is based on explosion. Think about your car engine. What happens inside those cylinders?
A bang, a tiny explosion. Piston goes down, crankshaft turns.
Right. Explosion, expansion. You are taking something from a central point, a condensed bit of fuel, and forcing it out to the periphery. You are creating heat. You are creating immense pressure. You are forcing elements together against their will to create a detonation. It is centrifugal. It pushes out.
And Schauberger called this de-animating.
Yes, or retrogressive. He argued that nature only uses explosion for one single purpose. Decomposition.
Decomposition, you mean like rot?
Exactly. Think about a dead body. Or a rotting log in the forest. What happens? It bloats, it expands, it heats up as the bacteria break it all down. It breaks structure apart. So Schauberger's point was, by basing our entire civilization on explosion, on the internal combustion engine, we are essentially powering our world with the forces of decay.
Wow. That is a heavy thought. We're all driving around in machines that are just mimicking the process of something rotting.
And it's incredibly inefficient. That's the other part of the argument that's so compelling. There's a reference in the source notes to Ludwig Boltzmann, the famous physicist. Yeah. He found that when you try to force atoms to move in a straight line, which is what our pistons and pipes and wires all try to do, they resist.
Wait, atoms don't want to move in a straight line, they want to spin.
Atoms want to spin, they want to move in curves. There are no straight lines in nature. Just look around you. Look at a river, a tree branch, a vein in your own body. It's all curves. So when we force matter into straight lines and right angles, we create immense resistance. That resistance manifests as heat and friction.
So the heat pouring out of our engines, that's not just a byproduct of power. That's the atoms literally fighting back against being forced into a straight line.
In a way, yes. It's the atoms screaming in protest. Yeah. And in a standard internal combustion engine, we lose something like 90% of the potential energy as waste heat. 90%.
That's staggering.
We are fighting the fundamental nature of matter itself. We are spending the vast majority of our fuel just trying to overcome the resistance of the atoms that just want to spin.
So we're fighting the atoms, we're fighting the geometry. And Schauberger's whole point was, why fight? Why not just move with the atoms?
Which brings us to the life force. If the death force is explosion, heat, and pressure, the life force is.
Implosion, cooling, suction.
Suction. And this is the hardest part for modern people to get their heads around because we are so conditioned to think in terms of pushing.
Right. We push buttons, we push pedals, we use pumps to push fluids through pipes.
Nature pulls. Schauberger used the example of the heart. This is a classic medical debate that's still going on. He argued the heart isn't a pressure pump.
Wait. The heart isn't a pump. That's like the first thing you learn in biology.
Not a pressure pump. Just think about the mechanics of it. You have thousands upon thousands of miles of capillaries in the human body. Some are thinner than a single human hair. The blood has to move through all of them, and it has a certain viscosity. If the heart were trying to push that blood through by pressure alone, like a water pump in a high-rise building, the heart would need to be the size of a truck to generate enough PSI. The biological material of your arteries and veins would just burst. It's mechanically impossible.
So what did he think the heart was doing? A suction pump?
He viewed it as a suction pump, or maybe more like an impeller or a regulator for a flow that is already moving on its own. He believed the blood moves on its own spiraling vortex, and the heart just gives it a little kick, aids that natural motion. But the visual analogy that really makes this click is the tornado versus the explosion.
Okay, paint the picture for us.
An explosion takes organized matter, say a stick of dynamite, and scatters it into total chaos. It moves from the center to the periphery. It destroys structure.
Boom. Just dust and debris.
A tornado does the absolute opposite. It starts wide on the periphery and moves inward. It moves from the outside to the center. It takes chaotic debris, dust, cars, houses, and organizes it into a tight, coherent column. That is implosion. That is the life force. It creates structure, it creates coherence, and crucially, it creates coolness.
Wait, tornadoes are cool. I mean, metaphorically they are, but physically, I always thought they were just violent storms.
The center of a vortex is cooler than the periphery. This is a known thermodynamic principle. This is the cooling aspect of the life force. Modern tech generates waste heat. Nature's processes generate cooling. And this is where we have to talk about water.
Yes, the water. This is my favorite part of the Schauberger lore, the story of the trout.
The trout, it's a fantastic observation.
So Schauberger is sitting by a mountain stream, and he sees a trout holding its position in a rushing current. It's not swimming, it's not slapping its tail, it's just hovering there, motionless.
And if you've ever tried to stand in a fast-moving river, you know the force against you is immense. It wants to push you downstream. Yet this trout is just sitting there with apparently zero effort. And then when it gets startled, it shoots upstream against the current, faster than it could possibly swim if it were just using its own muscle power.
How is that even possible?
Schauberger realized the trout was surfing an invisible wave of energy that flows opposite to the direction of the water. He called it the levitational force of the water.
Levitational force?
Yeah.
In water?
Yes. He saw that the water in a natural stream isn't just tumbling down a hill, it's spiraling. It's creating these longitudinal vortices like invisible corkscrews of energy spinning through the water. The trout knows how to shape its body to enter into that vortex, and the suction of the vortex literally pulls it upstream.
So it's like it's falling upwards into a tiny vacuum.
In a sense, yes, it's utilizing the suction of the imploding water. But here's the critical part, the part that connects to everything else. This only works if the water is alive.
Alive?
Yeah.
And by alive, we don't just mean it has bacteria or fish in it, we mean it has a certain structure.
Exactly, structure and temperature. Schauberger was absolutely obsessed with the plus 4 degrees Celsius anomaly.
That's the point where water is at its densest, right?
Right. At 4 degrees Celsius, water is at its most dense and its most energetically potent. Schauberger called this the anomaly point. He said that small variations in temperature, even a tenth of a degree, are what create motion in water.
So tiny temperature gradients are what drive the natural flow.
Precisely. In a natural forest stream, you have trees shading the water, creating cool spots. You have cool banks. You have rocks that are warmed by the sun. These tiny temperature differences create these spiraling, rolling motions in the water. That motion charges the water. It gives it the capacity to carry minerals to support life.
And then we come along with our death force civil engineering.
We come along and we cut down all the trees. The water heats up. We straighten the riverbanks into concrete channels. We stop the spiraling.
We kill the water.
We kill it. When water heats up and is forced to flow in a straight line, it loses its carrying capacity. It drops its minerals. That's why we get sedimentation and silt buildup in our rivers. The river literally dies. It becomes aggressive. It starts to erode its banks violently, trying to find its natural curve again.
So the river is actually trying to fix itself, and all it wants is just to pour more concrete.
We just keep fighting it. We are fighting the life force of the water itself.
This connects directly to that point in the notes about deforestation. The idea that trees act as bipolar pumps.
Yes. The forest isn't just a collection of wood, it's a gigantic cooling machine. The canopy cools the ground, the roots draw up cool water from deep in the earth. This temperature difference between the canopy and the ground is what drives the sap flow. It drives the entire water cycle. When you remove the forest, you break that cooling cycle. You get fire technology, the death force dominating the landscape, you get droughts, you get floods. The natural regulation is just gone.
So, okay, we have established the problem. We are exploding, heating, and pressing everything. Nature is imploding, cooling, and sucking. And we are clearly losing the battle.
We are hitting the wall. The Sapphire Project proved that our force it until it works method has a hard limit.
But there are people trying to break through that wall. And this brings us to the modern alchemists. We need to talk about Malcolm Bendel and the Thunderstorm Generator.
Malcolm Bendel. Now, this is where all that theory really meets the metal. Bendel has built a device that essentially tries to mimic the geometry of nature, the geometry of the tornado, to generate energy and clean exhaust fumes.
The Thunderstorm Generator, it's a great name. How does it work? Is it just some kind of fancy muffler?
It's much, much more than that. It's based on the idea that if you can create the right kind of vortex, a powerful imploding vortex, you can create a stable plasmoid.
A plasmoid, like a ball of plasma, a self-contained little star.
Exactly like that, like ball lightning. A structured, coherent ball of plasma. The device is designed to mimic the conditions of a thunderstorm. Think about what happens in a storm. You have massive turbulence, rapid pressure changes, huge electrical discharges. Bendel's device uses bubbling water, shock waves, and very specific geometries to create these conditions inside a small reactor.
The notes mention something called the bubble theory. Cavitation. I've heard of cavitation destroying boat propellers. It's a destructive force.
Yes. And this is a crucial distinction. When you shake water violently, you create bubbles. That's cavitation. Now, large bubbles just float to the top and pop. That's an explosion. That's the death force again. But microbubbles are different. They don't pop. They implode.
They collapse in on themselves.
They collapse with such incredible force and speed that they generate massive temperatures and pressures at a single microscopic point. They actually emit light. The phenomenon is called sonoluminescence.
Sound creating light.
Exactly. Inside that tiny collapsing bubble, for a nanosecond, you have the conditions of a star. You have what they call a 0 point.
And this is where Bendel brings in the yin and yang idea.
Right. He talks about counter-rotating fields. You have a clockwise spin and a counterclockwise spin. In standard physics, we usually just look at one or the other. But Bendel argues that where these two meet, where the death force of expansion meets the life force of contraction, that is the 0 point. That is where fusion can happen.
Fusion, are we talking about cold fusion here? Or what they now call low-energy nuclear reactions, LNR?
LNR is the term, yes.
Yeah.
And this is easily the most controversial part of this entire deep dive. The claim is that inside these vortex reactors, actual transmutation of elements is occurring.
Alchemy. The old dream of turning lead into gold. Or in this case, what?
The notes highlight what they call a carbon anomaly. They run these reactors with tungsten electrodes, just like in the Sapphire Project. And after the run, the tungsten is degraded. But they run tests on the residue, and they find elements that absolutely should not be there. Carbon, magnesium, calcium.
Where did the carbon come from? It wasn't in there to begin with.
That is the million-dollar question. The skeptics would immediately say contamination, oh, you touched it with a dirty glove, or something like that. But the analysis seems to suggest something far stranger. It suggests the tungsten itself is being broken down.
Broken down into what?
Think of the periodic table not as a set of fixed, solid blocks, but more like a ladder. They call it the alpha and omega ladder.
Right.
Bendel argues that the plasmoid environment is so energetic it strips the atoms down to their fundamental components, protons and neutrons, and then reassembles them into new, more stable elements.
So it takes a heavy, complex atom, like tungsten, breaks it down into its basic Legos, and then rebuilds it as lighter things like carbon and magnesium.
That's the theory. And the math is fascinating. If you look at the atomic mass of the tungsten that's lost, and then you look at the atomic mass of the new elements they find, it balances out. It's not magic. It's a kind of nuclear restructuring.
And this brings up that 10,000 meters per second threshold. I saw this number all over the research notes. What is that about?
That's what they call the universal transition velocity.
Okay, what happens at 10,000 meters per second?
That seems to be the speed limit for matter as we know it. When you accelerate a solid object or a jet of metal, like in a shaped charge explosive to that speed, it stops behaving like a solid. It behaves like a liquid. It becomes plastic.
Not plastic. You mean like putty?
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
At that speed, the molecular bonds can't hold the old structure together anymore. The material becomes susceptible to reorganization. It enters a state where consciousness or external fields can actually reshape it on a fundamental level. This is why the Sapphire Project tungsten disappeared. It didn't just melt, it likely hit a transition velocity and entered a plasma state where the rules of solid tungsten just don't apply anymore.
So Malcolm Bendel is essentially building a machine that uses vortexes to accelerate matter to this transition point, and then he's harvesting the energy that comes out of that restructuring process.
That is the claim. He calls it the alpha and omega.
Yeah.
You break it down to its end state, omega, and then rebuild it into its beginning state, alpha. And in that process, you release enormous amounts of energy, clean energy, because you're not burning fuel, you're restructuring matter itself.
It sounds almost too good to be true. But then you look at the reports about the exhaust from these things. They say the exhaust is cleaner than the air going in.
Because it's an implosion process. Explosion creates waste ash, smoke, soot, all the stuff we call pollution. Implosion integrates, it structures, it cleans. So yes, the exhaust from the Thunderstorm Generator is reported to be practically zero emission. It's actually scrubbing the air that passes through it.
Okay, so we've covered the physics. We have the death force versus the life force. We have the machines that are trying to use this. But now we have to go deeper, because you can't talk about any of this stuff without eventually getting to Rudolf Steiner.
Steiner is the key that unlocks the whole thing. Without Steiner, this is just a collection of weird engineering anomalies. With Steiner, it becomes a spiritual crisis with a technological solution.
And Steiner was talking about all of this in the early 1900s. He basically predicted this entire paradigm.
He did. He warned us about the dragon.
The dragon.
And he wasn't just speaking metaphorically. I mean, he was, but he also meant it in a very literal cosmic sense. He talked about the law of conservation of energy as a trap.
Wait a minute, the law of conservation of energy is a trap. That's physics 101. Energy cannot be created or destroyed. It's a fundamental law.
Right. And Steiner said, that is the dragon. Because if energy can never be created, then the universe is a closed loop. It's a machine that's just winding down. Entropy always increases. Eventually, you get heat death. Everything just stops. Everything dies.
It's a completely hopeless universe. It's a prison.
It is a materialist prison. Steiner argued that the human spirit, our moral impulses specifically, are not subject to the law of conservation. He said that when you make a moral decision, when you act out of love or genuine enthusiasm, you are actually bringing new energy into the system from a higher spiritual realm.
Seeds of worlds. I remember that phrase from the notes.
Yes, seeds of worlds. He believed we are co-creators of the universe. But the law of conservation denies that. It says we are just cogwheels, just transferring existing energy from one form to another. So, for Steiner, conquering the dragon means realizing that materialist physics is incomplete. It applies to the corpse of nature, but not to the living spirit.
And this leads directly to his view on matter itself. Matter is frozen light.
This is such a beautiful concept. Steiner, and later the projective geometry work of people like George Adams and Olive Witcher, suggest that matter is not the fundamental reality. Matter is just compressed ether. It's frozen light.
So a rock is just light that's been slowed down and knotted up into a specific pattern.
Exactly. And if you treat that rock as just dead mass, you have to use brute force to move it. You have to explode it to break it. But if you understand that it is frozen light, that it has a rhythm, a frequency, a life of its own, then you can interact with it differently. You can resonate with it.
That sounds an awful lot like the legends of ancient civilizations moving massive stones with sound or vibration.
It's the same core principle. If you align with the rhythm of the matter, with its life force, you get what looks like magic to an outsider. You get over unity. You get more energy out than you put in because you're not creating the energy. You're tapping into the aether itself. You're unfreezing the light.
But Steiner also had a warning, a very, very specific warning about how we deal with technology. He called it the log cabin protocol.
Ah, yes, the temptation to run away from it all.
And I feel this all the time. I see what's happening with AI, with the surveillance state, with all this death force technology everywhere, and my first instinct is to just move to a cabin in the woods and grow potatoes.
And Steiner says, do not do that. He says that is a fatal error.
Why? What's wrong with wanting to disconnect?
He calls it a fatal error because The spider's web, which was his term for the global technological grid, he basically predicted the internet in the 1920s, is here for a reason. He identified it as an Ahrimanic structure.
Ahrimanic meaning
Yeah.
soulless, coldly logical, mechanical.
All of that. The force of cold, dead, machine-like intelligence. The force that wants to make humans into extensions of the machine. But Steiner says if we run away from it, if we abandon the field, we leave the web empty. We leave it solely to Ahriman.
So if all the good people with spiritual impulses flee from technology, the technology itself becomes purely evil by default.
Exactly. We create a spiritual vacuum, and Ahriman rushes in to fill it. Nature abhors a vacuum.
So what's the alternative? He called it the Michaelic mandate.
The mandate is to face the dragon, to enter the technology, but not to surrender to it. We have to infuse it with what he called spiritual heat.
Spiritual heat.
Consciousness, enthusiasm, warmth, love. We have to use the technology, but we have to drive it with a moral consciousness. We have to start designing it with these life force principles in mind.
This sounds a lot like what the field of biogeometry is trying to do.
It does, absolutely. Biogeometry, which was founded by Dr. Ibrahim Karim in Egypt, is basically the practical, physical application of this idea. It's engineering with the life force.
They talk a lot about shapes.
Yeah.
Angles.
Right.
Like the 51-degree angle of the Great Pyramid.
Or modifying the corners in a room. They discovered a specific energetic quality they call BG3, which is a harmonizing, life-affirming energy. And the idea is that specific shapes and angles can transmute the quality of energy. You can take a harmful electromagnetic field, a death force field, from, say, a Wi-Fi router, and by applying the right geometry near it, you can flip its polarity. You can make it beneficial to life.
So instead of smashing the Wi-Fi router with a hammer, you put a specific geometric shape on it and harmonize its field.
You harmonize it, you add the centripetal implosive quality back into the centrifugal explosive radiation, you bring the motion back into balance.
This brings us to the very practical implications for today. Because right now, the sources argue we are literally suffocating the planet electrically.
Yes, the charge problem. This is huge.
The atmosphere is supposed to be negatively charged, is that right?
Well, there's a natural balance. The Earth has a charge, the ionosphere has a charge. There's a potential between them. But modern pollution, all the particulates from burning fossil fuels, the heavy metals, the electrosmog from all our devices, is filling the atmosphere with positive ions.
And positive ions are bad.
In this context, yes. Positive ions are associated with fatigue, with inflammation, with the death force. Negative ions, which you find in abundance near waterfalls, in deep forests, or in the air after a thunderstorm, are life-affirming. They spin clockwise in the Bendel model. They are implosive and healing.
So by burning fossil fuels and blasting radio waves everywhere, we are creating a kind of positive ion prison around the planet.
We are destroying the electrical capacity of the atmosphere to support life. It's not just about greenhouse gases trapping heat, as important as that is. It's about the fundamental electrical quality of the air we breathe. We are creating a dead atmosphere.
And the solution would be to introduce spin-up technology.
Technologies that mimic the tornado. Technologies that generate negative ions. If we switched our engines from explosion, which are massive positive ion generators, to implosion, which generate negative ions, we wouldn't just stop polluting. We would actively start to heal the atmosphere. We would be scrubbing the air clean with every mile we drive.
That is a staggering thought. Your car becoming a mobile air purifier.
It's possible. The physics seems to support it. The prototype Thunderstorm Generator seems to do it.
But there's a catch. And the notes mention this explicitly. It's the consciousness factor.
The operator effect. This is the part that materialist science will never accept.
Talk about that experiment with the plants. The vortex energizer.
This was a simple experiment someone did. You take two identical plants, you give them water from the same source. Plant A gets regular tap water. Plant B gets water that has been stirred into a vortex.
Stirred, that's it.
Stirred with intention, creating a small whirlpool in the water before you give it to the plant. And the results were that the plant with the vortexed water grew significantly faster and healthier.
Just from the motion imparted to the water.
Just from the motion. The motion imparts structure. It imparts information or life force. But here's the kicker. In this new physics, the physics of plasmoids, subtle energy, the consciousness of the person building or operating the machine matters. It's part of the equation.
Consciousness completes physics.
Yes. You can't just build a life force machine with a death force mindset. If you are angry, stressed, greedy, the claim is you actually affect the field of the device. The resonance fails.
That would explain why this kind of technology is so notoriously hard to replicate in a standard skeptical laboratory environment. If a skeptic walks in with the deep-seated belief that this is all garbage, do they actually crash the experiment with their own consciousness?
It's the observer effect from quantum mechanics, but on a macro scale. In quantum mechanics, the observer just affects the particle. In this macro scale, life force physics, the operator is part of the circuit. You have to be in resonance with the machine for it to work optimally.
The notes have a great line. Death force tech is easy. It's brute force.
It is. You don't need to be a good person to light a stick of dynamite. It explodes no matter who you are. That's the nature of the death force. It's indiscriminate and dumb.
But life force tech requires alignment. It requires a certain state of being.
It requires moral development. And this brings us right back to Steiner. We cannot unlock these higher technologies, these over-unity devices that tap the ether, until we have the moral capacity to wield them responsibly. If we gave a working Thunderstorm Generator to a warlord, what would happen?
He'd probably find a way to make it explode somehow.
Or it just wouldn't work for him. The life force itself might refuse to cooperate with a destructive intent.
That's a kind of built-in cosmic safety mechanism.
A cosmic safety mechanism. That's a perfect way to put it.
So, where does all of this leave us? We've gone from the Sapphire Project to the trout in the stream to the Thunderstorm Generator all the way to Steiner's dragon.
It leaves us with a choice, a fundamental choice of motion.
We aren't running out of energy.
No, not at all. We are swimming in a literal ocean of energy. The ether is everywhere. The energy in the vacuum is functionally infinite.
We've just been using the wrong key for the lock.
We've been trying to pick the lock with a sledgehammer. That's what pressure and explosion are. We need the actual key, which is suction and implosion.
It's the difference between trying to push a rope and pulling it.
That's a perfect analogy. You can't push a rope. It just kinks and tangles and resists. But if you pull it, it aligns perfectly and follows you anywhere. Nature pulls, we push.
So for the listener right now, maybe driving their combustion engine car or sitting in their air-conditioned room, what is the ultimate takeaway?
The takeaway is to start noticing the difference between the corpse and the movement.
Explain that one last time. It's a powerful idea.
Material science, our current science, studies the corpse. It studies the finished form, the dead rock, the dissected frog. It measures the weight, the size, the chemical composition of the thing after it's dead.
But it misses the life that was in it.
It completely misses the movement that created the form in the first place, the invisible spiral that grew the seashell, the living vortex that shaped the riverbed. True science, the science of the future, must study the movement, the invisible spiraling force that precedes and organizes the matter.
And we can apply this internally to ourselves.
You have to. You are, what, 99% water by molecule count?
And water responds to consciousness